Hi, friend. Welcome. We have arrived to Romans chapter 14. I'm really thankful that you're here. Today's passage, well, really, Romans chapter 14, takes a bit of a turn, and we come to a specific issue to the church in Rome. We'll unpack that just a little bit. We'll try to put this passage in context. But before we do, let's go ahead and read the passage. Just 4 short verses today. Romans 14, verse 1. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. All right, excellent. Well, we need to, I think, put this into context as we unpack these 4 short verses and continue on through the rest of Romans chapter 14. Let's just remember what it is that we're reading. We are reading a letter, right? We are reading Paul's letter to the church in Rome. So the who is Paul, and it is also the people of the church in Rome. And we've already gathered, as we've studied this letter, that the church is made up of 2 different backgrounds of people. We have the Jewish believers and we have the Gentile believers. And we can surmise once we get to this point, well, really, I think we can surmise from the beginning that there is an issue between those of the 2 different backgrounds. There's a little bit of strife, some kind of disunity here. So this is a letter, it's a communication, and we only hear the viewpoint of Paul. So we don't fully know the whole issue of disunity, but we can kind of get the gist of it. You know what I mean? I'm sure that all of you have experienced being in a store today and somebody has their earphones on and they're having a phone conversation and you can hear one side of that phone conversation, right? Because the person is meandering through the aisles and talking in a normal voice and you can't help but overhear and sort of get the gist of what the issue is. That's the situation we have in any New Testament letter, and that shines pretty brightly here in Paul's letter to the Romans. All right, so we know we have these Jewish believers and the Gentile believers, and we can surmise that there is an issue with disunity. And where do we get that from today's passage? Oh boy, from these 2 strong words of despising one another and passing judgment on one another. I just want to point out how strong these words are. I mean, friends, this ought not to happen amongst believers, right? Okay, to despise means to utterly disdain, to treat contemptuously as if completely worthless or despicable, all right? We are not to treat any human being in such a way, right? All humans have been created in God's image. So we ought not to despise anyone, let alone despise someone in our own church. All right, so there's this, let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment. To pass judgment is to evaluate, to form some critical opinion of something. It could be either positive or negative by examination or scrutiny. All right, and there's some pretty darn good cross references here. Colossians 2:16. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. James 4:12. There's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? All right, so in that cross-reference of Colossians, we see that, okay, this is probably has to do with some of the Jewish laws, and that the Jewish believers are holding on to those. And what else do we see? That here would be the ones weak in faith. Where do we get that from today? Well, specifically in verse 2, Paul addresses an issue over food. Most likely this is over Jewish kosher food versus non-kosher. And we see, okay, the weak eats only vegetables. The strong feels like they can eat anything, all right? So we have, and I want to make clear here, that's the difference between the weak and the strong, but weak and strong in what? Paul says in faith. In faith. What is faith? Well, we've been talking about this all throughout the letter to the Romans. This is trusting in Jesus. So again, I just want to make clear that all of these people here are believers. It's just that some come from a Jewish background, some come from this Gentile background. We need to note that both have faith. And so implicit here is that the food eaten by believers is a non-issue, right? This has nothing to do with a sin issue. There is no reason for despising or passing judgment on a brother or sister. And we can go back all the way to Romans chapter 1. In fact, I did. I wanted to see if Paul addressed this right at the beginning of his letter. What he addressed was all manner of unrighteousness. So let me just remind us what that looked like. That way we can kind of compare and contrast this really kind of a non-issue, this food issue, versus what unrighteousness looks like. Paul listed a whole bunch of different things in Romans chapter 1, verse 29. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. All right, and wow, just reading that is going to cause me to tear up once again. You might remember we just basically fell on our face, recognizing that we all have sinned, right? We all can see our own sin within that list. So today's passage is completely different. This food issue is a non-issue. It's just a non-issue. So with that, what does Paul tell the believers of the church to do? How then are they to live? He says, so welcome. This was verse 1. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him. Welcome him. To welcome someone into one's presence or home. And we see that word again in verse 3. Why? For God has welcomed him. We're not to pass judgment. Why? Because God has welcomed each one of us into his own presence. Here is being unified with the heart of God. All right, so we are to welcome one another. We are not to despise or pass judgment on one another. Again, why? God has welcomed. God has opened his arms wide and says, welcome, come to me, all you who are weary, right? All right. Number 2, Paul also says, it's the Lord that will help each of us to stand in faith. That was in verse 4. And he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. We each are accountable to Jesus. He is our master, and he is able to make us stand. That's what it means to be upheld, to make us stand, to help us persist in our faith. All right, so we can just ask that golden question. What is it that I learn about who God is? God welcomes us in his presence. The Lord helps us stand. He helps us persist in faith despite these non-issues. And then also, within this, there was just this beautiful cross-reference. And I'm sorry, I can't remember if I read this already or not. But in looking up weak, this word weak, to be wanting in strength or courage or will, the cross-reference that I jotted down was 1 Corinthians 9:22, where Paul says, to the weak, I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. Friends, that is love. That is love. Like if we also put this letter in context and we go back to Romans chapter 12, verse 9, let your love be genuine, Paul exhorted. In the last chapter, Paul said, look, owe no one anything, have no debts except to love each other. For the one who has loved another has fulfilled the law. And also in that chapter, verse 10, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is fulfilling the law. How can we do that? How can we let our love be genuine? How can we love our neighbor? Oh, I think this is it. To the weak, I became weak, that I might win the weak. I've become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. That is love. And friends, that is how Jesus loved. Did he not on our behalf become weak, that he might win the weak? So there's one more thing that we learn about who God is. Jesus himself became weak that he might win the weak. Here's how we love. Here's how we have a heart and a mind united with God's heart and mind. Here's how we love our neighbor. Application, wow, I think it's pretty straightforward. Welcome one another. Love those who are different, who have different opinions than we do. We are not to despise or to pass judgment. Oh, I think that is such a good word for us today, a practical word. There's so much division within the church, within our country, within our world. Friends, here's how we can shine for Jesus, by welcoming, by loving one another. We are to cast off despising and passing judgment on one another. We are to humbly put on love and welcome.